They used to call me the architect. Not because I designed buildings, but because I could construct airtight cases that put white-collar criminals behind bars for decades. 38 years as a federal prosecutor, specializing in financial fraud and elder exploitation, I'd sent hedge fund managers, corrupt bankers, and con artists to prison. I knew every trick, every loophole, every manipulation tactic in the book. Now, at 67, supposedly retired, I was sitting in a sleek conference room in downtown Seattle, watching my own daughter-in-law try to steal everything my late husband and I had built over 40 years of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. My son's wife, Amber, sat across from me with her lawyer, a slick 30-something named Trevor Holbrook from Morrison & Associates. She was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the concerned daughter-in-law to perfection. My son Michael wasn't here. He was on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, unreachable for another 3 weeks. Amber had timed this perfectly. "Mrs. Brennan," Trevor said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "we're all very concerned about you. Amber has noticed some troubling changes in your behavior over the past few months." I blinked slowly, letting my hand tremble slightly as I reached for the water glass. I'd been practicing this for weeks. Changes? I don't understand. Amber leaned forward, her designer perfume overwhelming the small space. "Mom, you called me 4 times last Tuesday, asking what day it was. You forgot our dinner reservation at Canlis. You left the stove on 3 times. None of that was true. Well, except the dinner reservation, but I'd canceled it deliberately after I'd found the first wire transfer. It had started 6 months ago, right after my husband Tom died of a massive heart attack. Tom had been a commercial real estate developer, successful enough that we'd never worried about money. He'd left me everything in a trust, about $4.2 million in assets, plus the house in Magnolia worth another $2.8 million. 3 weeks after the funeral, I'd noticed a $15,000 transfer from our money market account. When I called Amber to ask if Michael needed something, she'd been surprised, said she didn't know anything about it. I'd chalked it up to a mistake, maybe something Tom had set up before he died. But then there was another. $22,000, then $31,000, then $45,000. I'd pulled the records. Over 4 months, $238,000 had disappeared from various accounts, all transferred to an LLC called Cascade Holdings. I'd spent 2 weeks tracking it down using skills I'd honed prosecuting money laundering cases. Cascade Holdings was a shell company registered in Delaware, with Amber listed as the managing member. She'd been careful, spacing out the transfers, using different amounts, making it look random, but not careful enough. Not for someone who'd spent 4 decades following money trails. I'd also discovered something else. Trevor Holbrook wasn't just any lawyer. 10 years ago, he'd been an associate at a firm I'd investigated for helping clients hide assets from the IRS. The case had been dropped due to insufficient evidence, but I remembered his name. He'd been dirty then, and apparently he still was now. So I'd made a decision. I would play along. I would become the confused, declining widow they needed me to be. I would give them enough rope to hang themselves. "The stove?" I said now, my voice wavering slightly. I remember turning it off. I'm sure I did. Trevor exchanged a glance with Amber. He slid a document across the polished mahogany table. "Mrs. Brennan, we'd like to suggest that you sign a power of attorney, giving Amber the ability to manage your financial affairs. Just temporarily, of course, until we can get you properly assessed by a medical professional." There it was. The play. Once Amber had power of attorney, she could drain the accounts legally, sell the house, transfer everything into shell companies I'd never be able to touch. By the time Michael came home, I'd be in a memory care facility, and the money would be gone. I picked up the document, my hands shaking just enough to seem real. I'd done this hundreds of times in court, cross-examining defendants who thought they could fool me. The secret was in the micro-expressions, the tiny details that revealed truth from lies. Trevor's left eye twitched when he lied. Amber touched her collarbone when she was nervous. She was touching it now. "This is a lot of legal language," I said, squinting at the page. "What does sole discretion mean?" "It just means Amber can make decisions on your behalf," Trevor said smoothly. "Pay bills, manage investments, that sort of thing." Very standard. Standard if you wanted to commit elder financial abuse, which carried a sentence of up to 20 years in federal prison under the Elder Justice Act. I'd helped write parts of that legislation. I don't know, I said. Maybe I should wait for Michael to come home. Amber's voice took on an edge. Mom, Michael is gone for 3 more weeks. What if something happens? What if you have a medical emergency and no one can access your accounts to pay for treatment? Amber's right, Trevor added. Think of this as insurance. You can revoke it any time you want. That was technically true, but in practice, once someone had power of attorney, revoking it required proving mental competence. If I signed this, Amber would immediately start documenting my decline, making it nearly impossible to undo. I let a tear roll down my cheek. You really think I'm losing my mind? Amber grabbed my hand. Her nails were freshly manicured, French tips, probably $150 at the salon. My money, I thought. Oh, Mom, no. We just want to help you. You've been through so much with Dad's death. It's completely normal to be a little confused. I wasn't confused. I was perfectly clear. I knew that Amber had met Michael 6 years ago when she was working as a pharmaceutical sales rep. I knew she had $87,000 in credit card debt when they got married, which Tom and I had helped pay off. I knew she'd quit her job 2 years ago, claiming she wanted to focus on the marriage, which really meant focus on our money. I also knew that 3 months ago, she'd started seeing someone else. His name was Ryan Caldwell, a personal trainer at Equinox. I'd hired a private investigator, a retired FBI agent named Sarah Chen, who owed me a favor from a case we'd worked together. Sarah had photographs of Amber and Ryan having lunch, going to movies, checking into the Four Seasons. The plan was obvious. Drain the accounts, divorce Michael, move to California with Ryan where they'd already put a deposit on a condo in Manhattan Beach. I'd found the escrow documents in Amber's emails. Sarah was good at her job. Okay, I said finally, my voice small. If you think it's best, Trevor's face lit up. He probably got a cut of whatever Amber stole. He pulled out a pen, a Mont Blanc that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent. Just sign here, here, and initial here. I took the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. Amber was practically vibrating with anticipation. The conference room door opened. A woman in her 50s walked in, confident, carrying a leather portfolio. She wore a gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Behind her were 2 men in dark suits. Federal agents, I knew immediately. You can always tell. Trevor shot to his feet. Excuse me, this is a private meeting. Sarah Chen. FBI, the woman said, flashing her credentials. Please sit down, Mr. Holbrook. Amber's face went white. What is this? Mom, did you call someone? I set down the pen carefully. The tremor in my hands was gone. My voice, when I spoke, was steady and clear. Actually, yes. I called several people. Trevor's professional mask slipped. Mrs. Brennan, I don't think you understand. Let me stop you right there, Mr. Holbrook. I pulled a folder from my bag, the one I'd been carrying the whole time. My name is Evelyn Brennan. I served as an assistant United States attorney for the Western District of Washington from 1985 to 2023. I specialized in financial fraud, money laundering, and elder exploitation. I've prosecuted over 200 cases with a conviction rate of 96%. The room went silent. You could hear the ventilation system humming. I opened the folder. Amber, you've stolen $238,000 from me over the past 4 months. The transfers were made to Cascade Holdings, LLC, a shell company you registered in Delaware on March 15th, 3 weeks after my husband's funeral. You used our joint account routing numbers, which you accessed using a password you obtained by installing keylogger software on my laptop last Christmas. That's computer fraud, by the way. Adds another 5 years. Amber's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. I turned to Trevor. Mr. Holbrook, you've assisted in this scheme by drafting fraudulent power of attorney documents with the intent to facilitate financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. You've also violated attorney ethics rules by failing to report suspected financial abuse. The Washington State Bar Association has already been notified. I expect you'll be disbarred within 6 months. Trevor sank back into his chair. I've spent the last 3 months documenting everything, I continued. Every transaction, every email, every phone call. I've got footage from security cameras I installed in my house showing Amber going through my files when she thought I was napping. I've got testimony from my doctors confirming I have no cognitive decline whatsoever. I've got bank records, phone records, and a very detailed timeline. I pulled out a stack of documents, each one tabbed and highlighted. Old habits die hard. I've also got evidence of your relationship with Ryan Caldwell, including the condo you're buying in Manhattan Beach. That's relevant because it establishes motive and shows premeditation. You weren't stealing out of desperation, Amber. You were stealing to fund your exit plan. Amber finally found her voice. Michael will never believe you. He loves me. Michael, I said quietly, is going to be devastated, but he'll believe me when he sees the evidence. All of it. Including the texts where you called him boring and just a means to an end. That one hurt. I could see it in her face. Some part of her had convinced herself this was justified, that Michael somehow deserved it. Sarah stepped forward. Amber Brennan, Trevor Holbrook, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and computer fraud. You have the right to remain attorney. I tuned out the Miranda rights. I'd heard them 1,000 times. Instead, I watched Amber's face crumble, watched Trevor's professional composure shatter. They'd thought they were playing checkers. They didn't realize they were up against someone who'd spent 40 years playing chess against criminals far smarter than them. The other 2 agents led them out in handcuffs. Sarah stayed behind. Hell of a case, she said, shaking her head. When you called me 3 months ago, I thought you might be overreacting. I should have known better. You helped build half of it, I said. I couldn't have done it without you. What are you going to tell Michael? That was the part I'd been dreading. My son, who'd always seen the best in people, who'd fallen in love with a woman who'd seen him as nothing more than a bank account. How do you tell your child that the person they loved never loved them back? The truth, I said. All of it. He deserves that much. Sarah nodded. She turned to leave, then paused. You know, we could use someone like you at the Bureau. Elder fraud cases are exploding, and we're drowning in them. Most victims don't have your resources or expertise. They just lose everything. I thought about that. About the last 3 months, the thrill of the investigation, the satisfaction of building an airtight case. I'd missed it more than I wanted to admit. Retirement had been Tom's dream, not mine. I'd only agreed because he'd been so excited about traveling, spending time with grandchildren we'd hoped Michael and Amber would give us. Those grandchildren were never going to exist. Amber had been on birth control the entire marriage, according to her medical records. Another lie. I'll think about it, I said. After Sarah left, I sat alone in the conference room. Through the windows, I could see Elliott Bay, the ferries crossing back and forth, the Olympic Mountains in the distance. Tom had loved this view. We'd celebrated his biggest deals in this building, back when it was just being constructed. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael. 3 more weeks. Can't wait to see you and Amber. Love you, Mom. I closed my eyes. This was going to break his heart. But it would heal. Eventually. That's what I would tell him. Hearts break, but they heal. And when they do, they're stronger. I gathered my things and stood up. At 67, I'd thought my career was over. I'd thought I'd spend my retirement gardening and traveling and being the grandmother I'd always wanted to be. But life had other plans. As I walked out of the conference room, I passed a young woman in the lobby, maybe 30, with that hollow look I recognized from hundreds of victims I'd worked with over the years. She was meeting with a lawyer, probably about her father's estate. The lawyer had that same slick smile Trevor Holbrook had, predatory, calculating. I stopped, pulled out my card, the one that said Evelyn Brennan, attorney at law, retired. "Excuse me," I said to the woman. "I couldn't help but notice you look a little uncertain. I used to be a federal prosecutor specializing in elder fraud. If you want someone to look over whatever documents they're giving you, I'd be happy to help. No charge." The relief on her face was immediate. "Would you? Something feels wrong, but I don't know what." "That's called instinct," I said. "And it's usually right. Come on, let's go get some coffee and you can tell me what's going on." As we walked toward the elevators, I caught my reflection in the polished marble wall. I looked different than I had 3 months ago. Not older, sharper, the way I used to look in court, before a big cross-examination. They'd called me the architect because I built cases brick by brick, leaving no gaps, no weaknesses, no way out. Amber and Trevor had made the same mistake so many criminals make. They assumed that because I was older, I was weaker. They assumed that grief had made me vulnerable. They assumed that retirement meant I'd forgotten everything I'd learned. They'd assumed wrong, and I had a feeling they wouldn't be the last ones to make that mistake. Seattle was full of people like Amber and Trevor, predators who saw the elderly as easy targets. They saw gray hair and assumed soft minds. They saw retirement and assumed irrelevance. They never saw us coming until it was too late. As the elevator doors closed, I smiled. Retirement could wait. I had work to do, the kind of work I was born for, the kind that meant something, the kind that protected people who couldn't protect themselves. They used to call me the architect. Turns out, I still was.